Years ago, Dipesh Chakravarti, a well-known scholar, took up the memories of some of the victims of partition, and he noticed, that there was enormous degree of sense of loss and memories of villages where everything seemed to be perfect, including the relationship amongst communities. I will later come to this part of the story, but one noticeable feature of these memories was this, that many of the people who held this kind of memories were well-known leftist intellectuals and filmmakers who, on the slightest opportunity, were eager to talk of class relations, socio-economic discriminations in pre-partition South Asian societies. But when it came to the memories of this genocide, they could transcend somehow their ideological fervor unwittingly and perhaps unknowingly to directly claim that the relationship between Hindus and Muslims were perfect. They were not perfect. Everybody knows that. I am sure they also knew that. But I think it is not only a comment on what was, but it is also a subtle, inarticulate critique of what is. The past is invoked so that you can critique the present. The past is invoked to set up a standard which can be mythical but is a standard nonetheless. A vital part of these subjectivities that shape such invocation of the past and includes the right to disapprove and dislike others. And this is a strange proposition because the Enlightenment vision has taught us that we must one by one shade our prejudices, stereotypes, negative imageries of other communities. We must sanitize ourselves to become proper citizens of a modern state. We must not dislike other cultures and their artifacts. I am suggesting to you that, and this is my second proposition, that such a sanitized, tough definition of tolerance is not necessary. Because the same tolerance can come in another way, where it does not become a struggle at every point for an individual to hide his real feelings and for the society to do so, because ultimately that also leads to a very sanitized version of tolerance of diversity, in the sense that you do not really tolerate radical diversity, you tolerate tamed, housebroken, defanged forms of diversity. Diversity which you think is compatible with contemporary demands of statecraft, contemporary concepts of global common sense as shared by the global middle class, and diversity which cannot and need not threaten, will not threaten your ideas of a secularizing society. One result of it is this, that today we cannot even say we dislike cultural artifacts that are not that central to that culture itself, for which there are critiques within the same culture. I was giving the example a few days ago that now it is impossible to say for a non-Englishman what Somerset Maugham said about English cuisine, that you can eat well in England, if you have your breakfast 3 times a day. But that will be seen as terribly, terribly intolerant and very crude and uncivilized. It is difficult nowadays to find people who will criticize Bombay commercial films, though a lot of Indians hate them. It is difficult to even say that Thai or Sri Lankan food is too spicy. Even though steam comes out of your ears, you have to claim that they are very nice, and you are not used to so much of spice, perhaps, and it's your fault, not the fault of the food. As a result, gradually, the kinds of tolerance we work with has boiled down to a cultural style or cosmopolitan style, if you like, where cultures in the long run survive only in 5 forms: as cuisine, as something that you can put on the stage, dance, theater, cinema. Culture that you can teach in the departments of anthropology in a university. And cultures you can put in a reservation where you can take your children once in a few years to see how other cultures live. And I think this, in a sense, is what we are driving cultures towards. This is our concept. This is the mainstream concept of cosmopolitanism. And this is the cosmopolitanism to which we are getting increasingly accustomed. This is the kind of defanged culture with which we would like to work and to display our tolerance. I will tell the story of a study many years ago I did of the city of Cochin in the southwest corner of India. Cochin is an ancient city, 3,000 years old. There are mentions of it in Roman texts. Pliny once mentioned that Roman wealth is being wasted on a useless commodity like Cochin black pepper. And Alaric the Goth once lifted the siege of Rome when he was supplied with adequate number of bushels of Cochin's black pepper. So it's a very old city. The earlier records of the city are more or less lost. India doesn't really live in history. It has lived outside history most of the time. But 600 years of recorded history is available on Cochin. And in this 600 years, there has been no record of any ethnic or religious strife in Cochin, though it has had all the ingredients for such a conflict. It has had always at least 15 major communities, very diverse communities, including 2 Jewish communities. And I thought I would go to Cochin and do not a history of Cochin, but a psychological profile of the kind clinical psychologists do of the city, a psychological biography of the city, so to speak. Not a biography, a psychological, if you like, clinical report on the city. And I started interviewing people in Cochin.